If I asked you 15 years ago to tell me what or who McLaren is, many of you would try to rack your brains to remember somebody named McLaren, not even realizing that McLaren was actually a car company. Ask that question today and many of you will instantly know that McLaren is a company that builds supercars that challenge the best from Ferrari and Lamborghini. So why such a dramatic shift? Well, the answer to this is quite a story, but luckily for us, McLaren is quite the company. So in today's video, we'll be looking at just how McLaren rose to the top of the supercar world in recent years, as well as how that same success almost led to McLaren's downfall. But before we get into it, if you like videos that take a deep dive into the economic world of cars, I have plenty of other videos for you to check out. So subscribe for more awesome content like this. Alright, let's get into it. To begin to understand McLaren's success, we have to understand its beginnings. The name McLaren has been around in racing circles since the 1950s. The founder, Bruce McLaren, was born in 1937 in Auckland, New Zealand. This origin actually explains why the kiwi bird was the first logo for McLaren all those years ago. The kiwi is the national bird of New Zealand, and McLaren has taken lots of styling cues from the bird over the years. Anyway, Bruce grew up, and in 1950 he moved to the United Kingdom, where he decided to take a crack at racing. He wasn't just average, but really, really good. In 1959, he won the United States Grand Prix in Sebring, Florida, and would go on to have a very successful Formula One career. His best finish in Formula One championship would be in second place. It was around this time that Bruce decided that he wanted to race for himself, and in 1963 he created his own racing company called Bruce McLaren Motor Racing Ltd. This allowed him to take his new racing team into Grand Prix racing in 1966. But Formula One wasn't the only racing class that he was good at. Bruce would continue to build and race sports cars, which included him being one of the drivers for the famous 1966 Le Mans 24 Hours winning Ford GT. If you've ever seen the movie Ford vs. Ferrari, then you would have seen part of Bruce McLaren's story. Another class of racing which McLaren found huge success in was the Can-Am series. This series was essentially a testing ground for some of the fastest and most powerful cars in the world at the time. The Can-Am series had very few restrictions on what a car should and shouldn't be, meaning that innovation took flight in this series. What's remarkable about this is that Bruce McLaren and his team won the Can-Am title in 5 consecutive years from 1967 until 1971. Unfortunately, the story of Bruce McLaren would end prematurely. In 1970, while testing one of the new Can-Am cars, there was an accident in testing that took his life. This happened only 2 weeks before the season was supposed to begin. Despite this tragic setback, the team did not give up. They went racing and did the only thing that they knew how to do in Bruce's honor, which was win. Bruce's legacy was one of drive and determination, and that legacy was lasting enough to continue to propel his racing team to success even without him. While the Can-Am series would eventually go away in 1987, Formula One remained a constant. The McLaren team was so successful at Formula One that it has become the second most successful team of all time, behind only Ferrari. They currently have 8 Constructors' Championships, this is a team title if you don't know F1, 12 Drivers' World Championships, and the team currently has 183 Grand Prix wins. This success has translated into a very well-known racing brand throughout the years. While racing may have come easy for the McLaren group, building cars that were for the road was much harder. Bruce McLaren installed a legacy of relentless pursuit in the McLaren company. He wanted to succeed at everything. With all the success he had at racing, he wanted to take that success and apply it to the road cars. In the 1960s, McLaren developed the M6 GT, which was designed to allow McLaren to race in the Group 4 GT series. The reason for this car's development was that this racing classification required that at least 50 road-going versions of the race car be made, and that's what exactly McLaren intended to do. Unfortunately, the vision of the M6 GT never became more than that, as with the passing of Bruce McLaren, the project was put on the shelf, never to leave development. It would take another 25 years before McLaren ventured into the road-going car business again. This time, though, they actually built the car. In 1992, McLaren debuted the McLaren F1, and this car was a technological marvel for its time. It came with a BMW-sourced naturally aspirated V12 that propelled it to a top speed of 240 miles per hour, which at the time made it the fastest production car in the world. The company only ever built 106 examples of the McLaren F1, slightly over 100 units really doesn't rival Lamborghini or Ferrari at the time, but it was a start. McLaren's experience in racing and their relentless pursuit of perfection was able to help them make the McLaren F1 the most formidable road car of the 1990s. Their success in racing and their success with the F1 road car ultimately inspired them to fulfill the vision of Bruce McLaren of not just dominating the racetrack, but also dominating the road. In 2010, McLaren Automotive was founded, and they were hard at work getting ready to debut their first car since the F1. In 2011, the McLaren MP4 12C was debuted. Yeah, it's a mouthful. Like its predecessor, the 12C, as it's most commonly called, was designed to dominate its competition. While the top speed was significantly lower than the F1, only reaching 207 miles per hour, the 12C was faster than its rivals from Ferrari and Lamborghini in nearly every measurable category, assuming the same price point. The 12C was also a technological marvel. It had a highly sophisticated suspension system that was largely controlled by a computer, active aerodynamics, and a brake control system inspired by McLaren's F1 knowledge. This car was hugely important to McLaren Automotive as it firmly established the company as a competitor to the likes of Lamborghini and Ferrari. The 12C would be the starting point of nearly all McLaren road cars to come after it, as part of McLaren's successes come from their ability to iterate on each of their successes. Cars like the 570S, the 650S, and the 720S all owe at least some of their success back to the 12C. All of those cars use updated versions of the technology that was first used in the 12C, such as iterations on the carbon fiber tub, which is the central structure of any McLaren, and that sophisticated suspension that I mentioned earlier. Another part of the success comes from McLaren's factory. All aspects of McLaren, the road division and the racing division, operate out of the McLaren Technology Centre in Woking, England. McLaren takes pride in how organized and purposeful their factory is. They believe it is the best one on earth, even if some other people would disagree. I'm looking at you, Toyota. Anyway, due to the racing division and the road division working together, this allows for the free exchange of ideas between the race cars and the road cars, creating the technological marvels we know today as McLarens. But just how successful did McLaren even get? That original 12C sold 3,400 total examples over a 3-year run, and that was just the beginning. Year over year, McLaren sales continued to grow. In 2018, McLaren Automotive produced and sold 4,829 cars for that year, which would serve as a high point for the company. To compare to Lamborghini sales from 2018, Lamborghini sold 5,750 cars that year, but around 1,761 of those cars were the Lamborghini Urus, their SUV. So if we compare sports cars to sports cars, Lamborghini sold 3,989 sports cars, which means in that year, McLaren actually outsold Lamborghini sports car to sports car by nearly 1,000 units. This is really impressive for a company that only began selling sports cars 7 years prior. This rapid growth can be attributed to the performance of the product, their connection to F1 heritage and lineage, and the hand-built in a factory cool factor. All of these factors help fuel the rapid rise of McLaren, but in 2022, McLaren only produced and sold 2,188 units compared to Lamborghini, which continued to grow and produced and sold 9,233 units. Now, to be fair, 5,367 of those units were Lamborghini Uruses, but this still means that Lamborghini was outselling McLarens in terms of sports cars. So what happened? Turns out that rapid growth is harder than it initially seems. With building road cars for the first time, there are always going to be some teething issues. This primarily manifested itself as a reliability issue with their cars. While McLaren's factory is very good, they run a fixed assembly line where one team builds an entire car. This is great for low volume, but when they're trying to ramp up production, this meant that they had to hire lots of new people and teach them the process. This led to many mistakes, which thus harmed McLaren's overall reputation. Another thing that harmed McLaren's reputation was its supreme focus on numbers. Seems kind of odd considering its cars are among the fastest on the planet, but supercar buyers want a driving experience, not just a fast car. 99% of the time you aren't driving at 150 miles per hour. This is where Ferrari and Lamborghini had McLaren soundly beat. This criticism was especially present for the 12C, which technically was perfect, but many people consider them to be far less fun to drive than their competitors. Also, all that Formula 1 success from their past? Yeah, a lot of that success has completely dried up in recent years. McLaren has only had one win in Formula 1 since 2012. A lot of that has to do with miscues and bad decisions, the worst of which was the McLaren-Honda partnership. The deal was that McLaren would build their cars and Honda would build the engines, but this failed spectacularly. The Honda engines were by far the worst on the grid during their partnership from 2015 to 2017, and this drove McLaren to all-time lows in their F1 performance. In fact, it was so bad that despite Honda paying McLaren $130 million a year, McLaren still broke up the partnership and was losing money at the time. However, the biggest hindrance to McLaren's success as of late has been the COVID-19 pandemic. Shocker, I know, which resulted in semiconductor shortages. This dramatically affected McLaren's ability to produce cars, and is for the most part the direct reason for the slump in sales over the last several years. This is compounded by the effect that McLaren is a small and independent company. Unlike their competitors, McLaren has no parent company to help them out with getting semiconductors. Lamborghini, for example, is owned by the Volkswagen Group, and while Ferrari was previously owned by Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, or Stellantis as it's now called, they still have connections within those organizations and the capital to get things done in a way that McLaren just doesn't have. So add all these factors together and it looks like a tough situation going forward. But setbacks are not new to McLaren, and things are actually kind of looking up at the moment. According to McLaren's own financial report, wholesale order volume was 2,188 in 2022, which showed an increase of 2% over the previous year. Which is fine, but the better news is that in 2023 McLaren sold 1,292 cars in the first half of 2023, which is a 52% increase from the same period in 2022. This is due to McLaren ramping up production of the Artura and the launch of the new McLaren 750S. In addition to the rebounding sales, the Formula One team has made turnarounds in recent years. In 2023, the team principal Zach Brown declared that the team is now profitable. This is huge news as it turns McLaren's F1 team from a money suck into an actual positive contributor like Ferrari's team is. In fact, Ferrari's F1 team is estimated to be worth $3.9 billion, and currently, for perspective, the average revenue of all F1 teams sits to be about $380 million per team. So assuming that Ferrari is above average, that means that Ferrari's F1 team helps add about 8% to Ferrari's revenue each year, which is a nice boost. If McLaren can go from a negative to a positive, that will significantly help the company. To bring it all back together, McLaren's success on the racetrack, driven by a desire for excellence, translated and helped launch their successes on the road. Yes, there have been challenges for McLaren, but their growth into the supercar world has been unprecedented. And I think it's a good lesson to learn from this, that drive for excellence is necessary to do great things in life. And in our quest to do great things, we're gonna inevitably have setbacks. But just like the McLaren team did when they lost Bruce McLaren, you have to keep going even when things get hard. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you guys next time.